Shh! You have to be quiet now. I'm going to win the game. While these cards are protecting me, you can't do anything.
So as you can see, the 3 white people stay quiet effects are quite good inside this format. And in this video we're going to dig deep into the data around these cards you see right here. And other cards with similar effect, for example Teferi Time Reveler that can become a combo with Displacer Kitten. The Planeswalker has an ability, each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery, doing kind of the same job. And then we have cards like Orim's Chant as well, that is also a form of secondary silence. And then we have some other strange options as Defense Grid and Dosan the Falling Leaf. So in this picture we're looking at the actual win rate of Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain of Eos and Silence, all these 3 together. Play all 3 5,089 different tournament entries, that's a lot. These are heavily played. And you have an average win rate with them together 24.75, which is quite good. But then you have this alternative, so now we are looking at decks that are including both Defense Grid and Dosan the Falling Leaf, but are excluding Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain and Silence, and suddenly the win rate is 18, and we only have 89 decks that have done this, indicating that this choice is weaker, the white cards are better. We can of course look at them individually one by one, so here we are looking at Grand Abolisher. Played individually, we're excluding Defense Grid, Ranger Captain and Silence. We have 31 decks that did this, so it's not very popular, and the win rate is 13.08, indicating that that's a bad idea. Don't play Grand Abolisher individually. The same thing applies to Ranger Captain. We have swapped position with Ranger Captain and Grand Abolisher, and now as you can see the win rate did increase like a micromillimeter, but still in red on 16, that is kinda weak. But then when we look at Silence, we have 609 decks that have played only Silence, excluding Defense Grid, Grand Abolisher and Ranger Captain, and we have an average win rate of 23.34, which is actually quite positive. And it somewhat stays around the same. As you're looking at this, we are moving Ranger Captain, Grand Abolisher and Silence together, and now looking at Silence individually, excluding them, it seems kinda equal. The takeaway could be that Grand Abolisher and Ranger Captain doesn't really affect your win rate that much, but still, I would say it's probably recommended to actually play them still. But the big takeaway is that Silence seems to be the powerhouse of the 3. Now, as I'm looking into a lot of different variations of possibilities, this is one that I found very interesting. So we have 301 deck that have played all 4 cards, Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain, Silence and Teferi. But now we are experimenting excluding Displacer Kitten, because the Displacer Kitten Teferi combo isn't something you should always do. But look at that win rate, it's 27.59. Now, in my personal speculation, I have a feeling of what kind of commander could actually pull this off, and the answer to that is cEDH Weatherlight Captain. And this is a pretty amazing result. However, we only have 12 decks that have entered into tournaments with this combination. So we have Grand Abolisher, Kutsil, Ranger Captain, Silence, cEDH Weatherlight Captain as the commander, Teferi Time Reveler. We're excluding Conqueror's Flail, Defense Grid and Orim's Chant. The win rate is 34%, but the result is not statistically significant, so I wouldn't trust this win rate actually. What is cool with cEDH is that you can tutor for Teferi or Kutsil and put them directly into play. So this is in the end not a win rate we can trust, but it's definitely showing a potential. I decided to expand a little bit more on this concept with these cards, including Teferi here. So Displacer Kitten still in exclusion, but we're adding Underworld Breach and Adnos, and tada, the win rate is climbing quite high. We have 29.01% from 172 decks that are playing all of these 6 cards together. But what about if we're excluding the Grixis core package? So in the exclusion now, we've kind of switched things around. We have Adnos, Fastest Oracle and Underworld Breach, while we still have the 4 core cards we're kind of focusing on, Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain, Silence and Teferi, but now we're adding Displacer Kitten to the inclusion. The Total sample size is 54 and the win rate is 25.48. So let's just look at a small comparison. We were looking at this at first. This is a very strong and promising win rate. We expanded it and added these cards, still keeping Displacer Kitten in exclusion. And then boom, we switched it to this. Observing how the win rate changes through each different change in card inclusion and exclusion. But what about if we're actually just cutting Teferi altogether and going back to that Wheel, Adnos and Phantasmal Image stuff? So here we have Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain and Silence. So we went from this to upgrading it and improving with the Grixis core package. And then we're experimenting by removing Teferi into the exclusion section. I find it very interesting that the win rate changed to the negative doing this, cutting Teferi basically. Still though, the win rate is quite high. This is a very strong win rate actually. And what you're looking at seems to be a highly recommended 6 cards to include inside your decklist. Let's look at another angle, Defense Grid. So when you're playing Defense Grid, Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain and Silence, you have 141 decks that have done this, entered into tournaments with that. They have an average win rate of 23.71, and that is good. But what if we're starting to mix that with tricks? The card you should focus on here is Oswald Fiddlebender. You see, a very strong thing to do is to trick things into play, going around counterspells. You see, a lot of counterspells can be used to stop Defense Grid while it's on the stack, but they can't stop Oswald Fiddlebender tricking it into play. You could sacrifice your Esper Sentinel in this case, and boom, you have a Defense Grid in play. And here then, in theoretical example, you could win with Doxa Distortionist and Cloudstone Courier if you have those in your hand. But you can also use Oswald Fiddlebender to sacrifice a 2 CMC Arcane Signet into the Cloudstone Courier as well. And we're basically cutting Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study to exclude the blue colored identity here. We have 36 decks that have entered into tournaments with this combination, and they have a pretty good win rate for a non-blue color identity, basically. 25.16, that is really good win rate. We can actually do a tweak ignoring the Oswald Fiddlebender and more looking into a mono red or Rakdos, or well, you could still have this inside your decklist, I guess. So you have Goblin Engineer that is doing a very similar thing. When Goblin Engineer enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. And then you can use either Goblin Welder or Goblin Engineer to just swap positions. You can do the exact same thing with Cloudstone Courier. So Goblin Engineer in this case can both tutor for combo artifact or a Grand Abolisher variant artifact. And the statistics is showcasing that this is actually working out quite good. And of course we can also combine this with more silence effects. So we have 46 decks that have played all of these 5 cards together, the Defense Grid, the Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain and Silence, and then the Oswald Fiddlebender to find that Defense Grid. This was a request video from Bad Commander, who wanna become a good commander, I guess. And if you have any suggestions of various videos you would like to see in the future, of this kind of style, if you want to see, okay, let's look at value engines and such, feel free to drop a comment below and I will start looking into other concepts that you're curious about. But also, as always, as well, if you have any other specific card combination that you would like to see that I didn't showcase inside this video, drop a comment below with the cards you would like to see a combination of win rate on, but also if you want to see exclusions on specific cards as well. And I will happily try my best to answer that specific question, because in the end, there's a lot of different things we could look into in this kind of video, but we don't want it to become too long. I just want to focus on the key things, so to say. And I do hope you've gotten a good message from this video. It seems that silence effects are actually really strong and highly recommended, as they have clearly showcased a huge increase in win rate, depending on how they are combined with other cards, so to say. But don't be afraid to play all 3, and even Teferi Time Reveler might be a card that is actually worthy of the inclusion as well.